On today's World Insight, rising barriers over artificial intelligence as a US-based AI developer restricts Chinese firms from using its services. What could this mean for the future of AI research? A widening technology gap?
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Recently, Anthropic, a leading U.S. AI company often seen as OpenAI's rival, has updated its terms of services. According to media reports, it has banned the sales to groups where Chinese entities have majority stake. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has responded, saying, quote, China opposes politicizing trade and sci-tech issues and using them as a weapon and tool. Such practice does no one good, end of quote. In recent years, the U.S. has adopted what some call small yard, high fence approach, banning the sale of semiconductors to China and blacklisting several Chinese tech companies on allegedly national security grounds. While the U.S. steps up containment strategies, China continues to emphasize openness and cooperation so that high-tech innovation can empower global development. So what might this divergence mean for the future of AI? Could protectionism ultimately accelerate China's domestic AI capabilities and strengthen its collaboration with the rest of the world? For example, those coming from the Global South. Let's bring in our panelists. For more, we are joined by Anwar Abdallah, founder and CEO of Vectara, a generative AI company in the United States, and also in Beijing, Andy Mark, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, always a commentator on the latest technology, and also in Beijing as well, Professor Guy Keke from the Beijing Institute of Technology. Gentlemen, what a pleasure to see all of you. So Amr, first of all, your immediate response to the news that Anthropic, the US AI giant, barring China-related entities.
Yeah, I would say I'm very, very surprised and shocked by the news, especially that will harm them as a company. Like, they need all of that extra engagement from users, and to be losing that to others seems like a big disadvantage to them.
Andy, your thoughts?
I, unfortunately, am not that surprised. So first, it's important to point out that Anthropic really does target software developers for its large language models. And software is incredibly important to drive the AI revolution. And I think what Anthropic has done here is engaged in short-term political virtue signaling to show that it is standing with the United States against China. But here's where I think it is a huge mistake for them to do this. According to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, China has 9.4 million software developers. According to the U.S.'s Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. has 1.5 million. So China has 6 times the software developers. So I think this is going to bode poorly for the adoption of AI for the United States. And this is not a blow, but it's a gift to China, because Chinese alternatives like Alibaba's Q1, DeepSeek, 0.1, Zhipu, et cetera, there's a number of Chinese alternatives that are as cheap as 1/7 of the cost of Anthropic's offerings.
This is the very first time that the major US AI company, by the company itself, be able to, rather, impose a formal public prohibition of the kind. Now, your response?
The U.S. company's main concern is its technology proliferation or the possibility of computers developing similar competitive capabilities. Actually, this is unnecessary given the reality, because as I observed, China is also exploring a path to develop AI technology with its own unique local characteristics. So this doesn't conflict with the with the U.S. technological development.
What does that mean for companies? Amar, that's what your points, and I think that's essential and crucial. Short-term vis-a-vis longer-term in terms of commercial interests and in terms of competitive advantages.
Like I agree with Andy, this is like a win for Chinese companies, and it's a mistake for Anthropic, even in their position compared to other models here in the US, even to Google and others. They will be now at a significant disadvantage, not to mention less revenue. They will be able to, they have one of the best coding models out there that many people depend on, so they will be making less revenue from it. But more importantly, these models get better over time because of our engagement with them. So by them losing all of the potential developers in China, or it's actually not in China, it's Chinese-owned companies, even if they're not in China, from what I've just read, that seems like I don't know, seems like a very short-sighted move.
Is this going to be representative, in other words, to the U.S. tech giants, what Anthropic is doing today to show the pledge of allegiance to the so-called U.S. national interest, or to suggest that they are patriotic? Is this kind of pledge of allegiance going to present what kind of images for these companies? And what does that mean for the tech world? Especially technologies are not likely to be limited to national borders, that's for sure. It's never happened that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. First, there has been examples in the past, like with Russia, as they did the war in Ukraine, many US companies followed orders, I would say, to stop dealing and doing business in Russia. So there was an like precedence to something like that. But that said, in this case, China hasn't done anything wrong. So to assume ill intent before anything has happened one way or another, it seems like a huge mistake in my personal opinion.
And the other thing, Andy, is that it's not just the companies based in China, but also companies that are having shares coming originally from China, 50 or above. And how is this making the tech world and application of technologies more complicated? Is this going to have a tremendous impact on the AI supply chains from now on?
Well, Wei, I'm not sure it will have a big impact on AI supply chain. So first of all, Anthropic is not a very large AI player. So from that perspective, I don't think it will have a very large impact. The other thing is I think Anthropic here is also making a business strategy decision in that it's looking to align with the US military establishment. So we see companies like Palantir, like Anduril, that are focused on applying artificial intelligence, other technologies to helping the US military. And it seems pretty clear to me, at least, that this is the path Anthropic is taking. And we have to contrast this with what NVIDIA is doing, which is saying, look, China is what I think Jensen Huang said, it's like a $50 billion market for AI chips, and that it is vital that NVIDIA be able to play in this space. So I would not overinterpret this as a big secular change or trend, but I think this is really one company, Anthropic, I think looking to make some sort of short-term political statement that may be also indicative of a business strategy decision to align more closely with the U.S. military-industrial establishment.
Are we going to see these kinds of, whether short-term or long-term, as one could argue, strategic decisions made by companies going to be very diverse from now on?
I think, first of all, it damages the open source ecosystem because actually, if we look at how technology being developed today, we can see we need like a lot of collaboration even globally. So this action definitely damages the open source ecosystem. I'm afraid that if like more companies follow this kind of policy, it could result in serious result because it further cause like division or isolation in the global industrial ecosystem. So this is one of my concerns, and it implies that like from our side, it requires us to persist in developing independent and controllable technologies.
We have seen some earlier debates when it comes to chips, Andy, as you mentioned, and also whether it's closed source or open source. That's related to earlier announcement that by DeepSeek in the year 2025. Now we are seeing another round. Is this going to be the same game repeated again? Is it going to be? Are we going to see very similar? The next, we're very similar scene two, so to speak, regarding what Anthropic is trying to do?
Wei, I think that the US and China are pursuing radically different AI strategies at the national level. So the US very clearly has said that it wants to dominate. It wants to make sure that no one can challenge its technology leadership in artificial intelligence. The Chinese approach is actually to disseminate and diffuse AI as broadly as possible to drive global development. And again, this is where I think open source plays into this. So open source can be much, much cheaper, even free, for people to download and use. So this makes it much more attractive for countries in the global south, companies, individuals, educational institutions. And I think as a result of this, as it's very clear, as we've seen with the World AI Conference, that the world, not just the global south, but even companies in the United States and Europe, find the Chinese approach and offerings, whether we're talking about DeepSeek, Q1, other of these open source, open weight models, as very, very appealing. So two radically different approaches. It certainly seems at this point that the Chinese approach is far more welcomed all around the world. And again, it's still very, very early days, and we have to see how things ultimately play out. But again, it's not just at the company level and the product level, but I think even the philosophical approach to what AI should be in the world is very, very different. And I think from this perspective, Wei, choice is a good thing.
There are Chinese systems that are already built on the cloud. And as a result of the latest announcement by the Anthropic, some of the end users of the Chinese system have already questioned whether they can still continue to use that service. So what about some of the immediate impact for some of the Chinese companies that are using cloud and their end users? What do you think will be the best way out for them?
First, for those who have been building on Anthropic, like if they were using Anthropic's solution, which is one of the best solutions when it comes to development and coding specifically, as Andy noted earlier, there's many other options out there. Like DeepSeek also is good at coding. Qwen, the new Qwen model is amazing in terms of its abilities for coding. Grok from Elon Musk is very, very good at coding. So there's many, many options. So from that perspective, I would not be very worried or concerned. But of course, if they're using other cloud vendors like AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or you name it, like the newer companies, up-and-coming companies for inference like Replicate or Hugging Face, these companies all now will need to reach out to their customer base and assure them, like, we are not going to be following suit with such a foolish move.
Interesting. Andy, your thoughts?
Well, Wei, I think here we have to be clear that what Anthropic offers is what's generally called a coding assistant, meaning that it helps programmers be more efficient. Now, in the short term, clearly, I think there will be some disruption. So just as if we're used to using Excel or spreadsheets and we have to shift to another product, it is uncomfortable. You do take a productivity hit in changing over. You have to learn new commands. You might have had libraries of instructions that you've saved, so you have to change. So this is certainly, I think, a short-term disruption. But again, from a bigger picture perspective, this is not a blow, but it's a gift to China, because we've seen Q1, I think some of these other companies immediately come out with offerings to help Chinese developers smoothly transition to their offerings as well. And I'll use another quick example. So with the semiconductor ban the US imposed on China, Huawei built a cloud matrix 384 system that while the chips are less powerful, the system itself actually has greater processing capacity than a comparable NVIDIA rack or stack. It uses more power, of course, but this is, I think, again, showing one, China's ability to quickly adapt and progress despite these obstacles. And this is, again, why I say this is a short-sighted move on the part of Anthropic. But again, not surprising, even understandable, but not likely to succeed.
We are seeing tech companies these days, particularly related to AI, have been going quite busy between capitals, especially Beijing and Washington, D.C. For example, just a few days ago, there was a tech dinner in which almost all of the big names except Elon Musk were present in the White House. They were claiming that they are going to invest a huge amount of money in the United States, and they're going to do this and that. We also see tech giants leaders visiting China and other countries in the world as well. So how do you see, in a way, a split personality almost these days? With the leadership of those tech companies, particularly those based in the United States, what might be the best strategy if you are there to provide some suggestions for all of them?
I'm sure many of them don't agree with a lot of the authoritarian kind of style that Trump has been introducing in the US. But at the same time, they still have to operate under his rules right now. They still have to work under his government. So what they're trying to do right now, like what Jensen Huang is trying to do very intelligently, AMD is trying to do the same thing, is trying to balance both. We want to be able to work with countries that maybe Trump is not very big fan or supporter of, but at the same time, we want to give something back to Trump himself so that he continues to support us as business leaders. So we saw, for example, that NVIDIA committed that part of the revenue will go directly back to the US government as an extra payment above taxes, which never happened in history before that we had something like that. So that's my advice to them, is just try to balance both at the same time. Business is business, like we say. So I disagree with this ban, like that Anthropic has formulated. First, because I think it's biased to just go and ban a company that is not doing anything wrong, and it stifles collaboration, it punishes responsible users, and it pushes them to silos in terms of not being able to collaborate across the world when it comes to AI, which is a very important area to be collaborating around. So I really, really, really hope that this move is an isolated move only to that company, primarily because, as Andy very insightfully noted, they just want to work a lot more tighter with the US government, with the US Army, and they're willing to forego all of that international revenue in exchange for that, despite the bad kind of repercussions it might have.
Coco, what about from the Chinese company's perspective? What does this say to them about the kind of decisions they need to make as to who to work with, to what extent, and how much they should depend on so-called ingenuous innovation in China, or how much they should depend on the global outcome of the latest technology?
Well, I observed that almost all Chinese IT giants have like products in the large AI model field, and many innovative companies also have demonstrated like strong capabilities in this area. So this domestically produced large AI model products can meet the current domestic demand for large AI models. So this is a fundamental. I think back to the prior question, we have different situations today because recall like Huawei ban a couple years ago, we didn't have like sufficient capabilities in producing chips. But today, if we look at the field of AI large model, we do have our plan. Well, we do have like our investment in talent development and the whole like supply chain. So this means it depends on like whether other people want to work with us. But the thing is that we do have our own capability to have like a very good AI products today.
But a lot of people have been watching China's V-Day parade just last week, and a very impressive collection of new weaponry for deterrence in order to protect the peace. However, one could also argue that China can be using AI technology for its defense and for issues related to security. And that is exactly what the Anthropic, the company itself, put it in its statement toward China. So how do you see, on the one hand, that the country that you are working in, China, is showing its muscles and strengths in terms of technology, especially AI, but on the other hand, it is also in the danger of others accusing China of using this technology for security-related issues?
First, I think Anthropic's statements are really not an accusation. It is a fact. Every major country must incorporate artificial intelligence into its military. It's like electricity. You have to do it. That being said, I am actually quite optimistic about the future of China-U.S. relations. So in Washington, D.C., is largely run by lawyers and ideologues, people who really see the world as they wish it were. Silicon Valley, like China, is run by engineers who see the world as it is and deal with very practical questions. So I think what is happening here is you look at, for example, Eric Schmidt, who's the former chairman of Google, who's very influential in political circles in the United States, very influential in national security topics, has come back and said he has respect for China, admiration for China because of its technological advances in AI, in robotics, in life sciences. So I think what this means is we see a greater influence of Silicon Valley on Washington, D.C. And this is ultimately positive because I think as more and more people in the United States recognize China's leadership in EVs, solar panels, increasingly artificial intelligence, perhaps soon in robotics, that they're going to say, look, we have to find a way to work with China. And this misguided, fantastical approach of saying we have to stop China is just impossible. So there are still ideologues in Washington, D.C. who say these things. But we see voices like Eric Schmidt, like Mark Andreessen, who once was a very, very negative China critic, has said about DeepSeek when it launched was that this is the greatest contribution to mankind because DeepSeek was open sourced. It showed you their work, the math, the equations of how they did what they did. And again, this will be transformative if we think about making the world a better place through artificial intelligence by sharing this, making it a global good. And I think, again, Americans that have an engineering background are starting to recognize this. And this is what makes me very, very optimistic about the future.
The discussions on AI governance is still going on between China and the United States, but at the same time, you see this intense competition and even in certain circumstances, rivalry, such as this one put forward by Anthropic toward the Chinese companies and Chinese users. So how do you articulate this very interesting combination of all possibilities all at the same time?
For me, I think global cooperation should be the mainstream. The continuous like international exchanges in technology are needed because we do need to form a lot of standards for AI if we consider the AI governance. So this need a lot of like people work together globally. I think this is the fundamental for us to have like a healthy development in the field of AI.
Right. Are we going to see a very different stage because now we see more discussions about AGI? Of course, its function and its role going to be quite different from the current stage of AI once it is the future. So are we going to see this discussion that we are having today going to be transformed in nature as to what it means to work together or work against each other? Amor?
To be honest, we have been working together. Like if you look at the overall advancements of AIs between not just the US, China, but the rest of the world, other countries as well, we have been, the people in the field, like the people writing papers, publishing research, contributing to open source, we have been working together. And that's why I think AI has been moving faster and faster. I absolutely give DeepSeek and China a lot of credit for the open source movement they started, but that cascaded into, Llama from Facebook, Grok from Elon Musk's company, even OpenAI a few weeks ago released an open source version of their model. So I agree with Andy, and I hope really that his intuition here is the right answer. This is a one-off event for a one-off company that is after a certain mission, and this is not going to spread to affect others, because at the end of the day, we should be building bridges, not walls, between us to be able to collaborate. And AI should be connecting the world, not carving it up like what this implies.
Andy, as we are talking about AGI, do you think this kind of actions such as that by Anthropic likely to be exacerbated by players from both sides or from the United States particularly? Or are we going to see, as technologies progressed, a very different picture?
Well, we have to see, Wei. I mean, this whole question of artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence has become a very controversial topic these days. I mean, some believe that this is impossible. I think China's approach, as again, I think very influential American policymakers have said that maybe China has the right approach in that let's be very practical. Let's develop a lot of smaller AI applications that make factories more productive, make logistics more efficient, improve healthcare. These are not frontier civilization changing technologies individually, but I think in the aggregate, again, I think being very practical, the Chinese approach, again, is very practical. This is how you improve people's lives. And that doesn't mean we, China or the world does not continue to push the technology frontier towards AGI, ASI. But I think China's approach really is let's do both. But again, I'm kind of generalizing a bit here, but maybe it's 60, 70%. Let's work on the practical applications. 30, 40%, let's push the technology envelope, where it seems the US really is saying, look, we want to dominate the frontier technology. So we have to see. Again, I think, both approaches are in a sense complementary. And again, I think there's far more to be gained for China and the US to work together. And voices in Silicon Valley are increasingly saying this, which makes me optimistic.
All right. Andy Mok, Guy Keke, and Amor Avadallah, thank you so much for all of your input. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.